rehabilitation. Viral Blood Tonic is a nutritionally balanced tonic fortified with iron to boost your appetite and energy level for high performance. Viral is easy to take and good for the entire family. Say goodbye to memorizing 1,001 short codes. Time, data, and Momo balance. Buy bundles with airtime or, from your Momo wallet. Monitor your data usage and calls made and experience a super convenient way to do things that you love on your favorite network, MTN. So, what are we doing today? We're having a conversation with our drive doctor, Dr. Yao Osafo from Medicas Hospital, and he is already in the building. Doc.
Kofi Hayford. My bald mate.
That is my forehead.
That's your forehead.
Yeah. My forehead shines a lot because I've been anointed with the
Kwame Nkrumah anointing.
No. I'm not
Kofi,
bald.
how's your wig been?
Me, my hair is downcast.
It's downcast.
Downcast.
What
did they say about it?
You know what the women say about bald men?
I don't care. I'm not bald. This your trap or not trap?
It will not trap.
No.
I'll call behind it.
No, it's good to see you again.
It's good to be here another Wednesday. And last week we started a very, very instructive conversation.
Yeah.
Right? We spoke about epilepsy and seizures. And today we're going to make time for our audience to join us.
Yeah, very, very important.
And we'll field a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So just by way of recap, we talked about epilepsy being one of the oldest medical conditions known to man. First description was about 3,000 years ago. If we can even imagine 3,000 years ago, that was when the first detailed medical description of this particular disease. We mentioned that it is a condition characterized by recurring episodes of seizures.
Right.
We also define a seizure as involuntary movements of the body. It could be involving the entire body or
some part of it.
Or some part of it. We also mentioned that we have about 50 million people globally who live with this disease. Another very important point I brought up last week was that this is a non-communicable medical condition. Contrary to what we believe in our homes and in our communities, that if somebody has epilepsy or is experiencing a seizure and you touch the person or you go near the person, you will be infected or the disease will be passed on, is not true. And just simply look at medical or healthcare professionals, from the EMT technicians, the ambulance people, to nurses in the emergency rooms or in hospitals, to doctors. I mean, we come into contact with individuals suffering this condition, and we don't contract it. So really, we want to settle that once and for all. It is a non-communicable disease. It is actually a disease that happens because there is excessive electrical discharges involving some brain cells, and depending on which part of the brain is involved, then you would present a certain way. So we also looked at some of the causes, the important causes of seizures. Someone needs to have a seizure. Sometimes, in about 50% of cases, Kofi, you will have an underlying cause, and we talked about some of them: meningitis, encephalitis, which is inflammation of the covering of the brain. We also realized that brain injuries, the reason why we're wearing of helmets, very, very important.
Yeah.
Same reason why some of these contact sports these days, they're looking into contact sports. There's a lot of research, especially the NFL, rugby, for example. I mean, football is a contact sport. They're even looking at football, the weight of the football.
Yeah.
Too heavy, because they're seeing that people who played football in the 60s and in the 70s, the football was made of different material. They think that repeated impact, heading the ball, and all of that. So trauma to the head, as can occur in all of these different settings, can also lead to an individual developing seizures. And then some people are born right from day one and they have some congenital defects that can also lead to that. A brain tumor can also do that. So today, part 2, we're going to look at the presentation. How do we diagnose, or how would you know that someone is having a seizure?
Okay.
Or has this medical condition we call epilepsy. So usually when we conduct our investigations and we don't have any underlying factors, then the doctor will stick on the label epilepsy. So having a seizure, which is this involuntary movement of the body, we'll call it a seizure. We would look for underlying causes. If we don't find one and it also becomes recurring, then we would call that epilepsy. So depending on the seizure, depending on what is happening, we may label it as a seizure. So what are the things that you can see? The first thing is this jerking movement.
Okay.
Jerking movement of the body. It may involve the arms or the legs. That is one of the commonest presentations of seizures, and that's what those who've seen it, that's what they know.
Yeah.
You see this jerking movement. Number 2, Kofi, you can have stiffness, where all of a sudden the upper limbs are all in extension,
Right.
like that, and then the lower limbs too are also held in extension. So the person becomes very, very stiff and motionless. So this is different from the jerking movements, but then they all become stiff. The neck muscles are all very, very, very stiff. The third form of it is that you can have this arching movement of the trunk. So if you've seen this contortionist, those who can bend their bodies all the way
degrees,
all the way back. So you see this bending motion of the trunk of the body. Wow. And you can go into that kind of state. So these are the very, very dramatic ones. Of course, when these things happen, then the individual can also become unconscious, and typically they would bite their tongue, because the sudden movement of the jaw muscles, for example, snaps the upper jaw to contact with the lower jaw, and you may not have enough time to get your tongue out of the way, and therefore you bite the tongue. So they bleed. All of a sudden you find a lot of bleeding from the mouth, and you see the tongue is a very vascularized structure of the body.
Yeah.
So even a little bite and it bleeds profusely. It's very, very, very dramatic. It's not life-threatening, but because it's highly vascularized, you tend to bleed a lot, and because of the force of the contraction, you bite on your tongue, you get that. You may also have bowel incontinence. They lose what we call the sphincter tone. So the anal sphincter is a ring of muscle that holds fecal matter in the rectum until we want to release it. Then it comes out. So when you have a seizure and you lose consciousness, for example, then that anal sphincter, that ring of muscle in the anal region, you lose control. So the person may soil themselves with fecal matter. So that's one thing you see. So if you find somebody unresponsive or unconscious and they've poo-pooed on themselves, then you know that we'll suspect that they've had a seizure. They've lost consciousness up there. Yeah. Same thing will happen with the bladder. All right. So they lose urine control. So the bladder also has a sphincter that holds urine. And then when we want to void, then we do so. So Kofi, when you lose consciousness during a seizure, you would also lose bladder control, and then you pee on yourself. So there is loss of bladder control, and then there's also loss of a bowel control, and therefore the individual will soil themselves with both urine and fecal matter.
Right.
Another type of seizure happens, and we call that the absence seizure. Kofi, in this type of seizure, the individual, you'll find them as if they're staring into space. Yes. So you're talking to me, I'm talking to you right now. Then in the next few seconds, I'm just looking in the distance. So there's a pause. And you think, this guy's not paying attention. Unfortunately, sometimes this happens in the classroom. And then the teacher will go and smack the child over the head sometimes. Say, hey, pay attention. The child may just have had a seizure and they froze and they caught staring into the distance, and it may be a seizure. They may also have what we call the chewing motions. All they're doing is they're having these chewing motions. Think they're chewing on something.
But they're not.
But they're not. That could also represent a certain type of seizure.
Okay.
And then lip smacking. Lip smacking. So they're smacking their lips. That may also be a type of seizure that they're experiencing.
Okay. I need a clarification on something.
Right.
When you talked about, being lost in your thoughts and looking into space.
Right.
Right. Is it all the time that you classify that as a type of seizure? Because I don't know about other people. I want to believe that it happens to all of us. Sometimes it happens to me quite a lot.
Right. So, Kofi, this one is very, very dramatic. And I paused my presentation briefly just to demonstrate that to our audience.
Right.
So you're having a chat with somebody, you are in a conversation, you are in a meeting, and then all of a sudden, it's not that they've lost their trend of thought. They just stop talking and they're staring into space.
Yeah, sometimes it happens.
And it happens. If sometimes you can go like waving your hand in front of them,
right?
And Kofi, they will not recognize it.
Okay.
So you can go like, if you find somebody staring into space, just wave your hand in front of them. They should be able to recognize that, and you can break that. But if they are not able to do that, it means they have it. It is likely they're just experiencing what we call an absence seizure.
Okay.
So it's a type of seizure where the individual is just found staring into space when they were involved in a conversation with other people.
Okay.
Then all of a sudden it goes that way. So do the thing that instinctively would happen. You try and wave your hand. Hello, are you here?
Right.
And they are just there. Don't smack them over the head if you are in a class or something. No, don't do that. Just wave your hand in front of them. It may be that they are having what we call an absence seizure.
Right.
It may happen, they are lip smacking, and they may even have what we call eyelid fluttering of the eyelid. The eyelid also has muscles in there, so then it's going like that, fluttering consistently. That may also be a form of seizure. So it could be very subtle things like what I've just described, or it could be the very overt, very dramatic jerking movements, stiffness that I described earlier. So these are the common presentations. This is how a seizure would commonly present.
Right.
When you have it like that, it's a clinical diagnosis. But sometimes the doctor would ask for an investigation we call an EEG. An EEG. Where we try and measure the electrical activity in the brain.
Okay.
So we'll strap some sensors over your head, and then over a period of 20-30 minutes they're taking some measurements of electrical activity in the brain, and then you have these medical experts, neurologists, give us a report, and if they find abnormal waves, electrical waves in there, then it helps you to clinch the diagnosis. Sometimes after the EEG there will be a further recommendation for a brain scan to be done, precisely because we mentioned some underlying medical conditions that can do that as well. Unfortunately, people who are into these days, Kofi, they say we should call them recreational drugs. There are some recreational drugs as well that can cause people to develop seizures, where you do a scan, you may not find anything on the scan, but you take a history and you realize that they are involved in the use of some recreational drugs. Are seizures treatable, Kofi? Absolutely yes. Okay,
before you go on to that, let me announce, ladies and gentlemen, that we're having a part 2 of the conversation that we started last week on epilepsy. And, doctor has said a lot about epilepsy. I'm sure that you had your questions from last week. We did a recap today. From last week, we looked at some of the key facts. We also looked at the overview. We took a look at causes of epilepsy, and then, of course, now we have taken a look at the signs and the symptoms. So if you have any questions for us, we're going to be activating the phones.
Send them through.
Yeah, you can call us on 0302-216-541. But also our WhatsApp number is active, 055-111-1997. Doc, there are just 2 questions that I want to ask before you go on to. So this one is from Mauli. He says that looking into air for how long? I think this is in relation to...
Right, so the time period for all of these things that we've described are variable.
Okay.
The most important thing is that the person is absent, is not with you And if you try, they may not realize it. This is always something that you observe. You know, somebody would observe that, hello, you just went off. Is it really? Yes, you went off. You were not. So the time duration really doesn't matter. It could be a few seconds. You know, usually it's not very long lasting. That like 5 minutes, the person is just there. No, it's not going to happen like that.
You run away.
Yes. So it's momentary, it's brief. All these dramatic seizures, the jerking movement and all of that, some will last a few seconds, others up to a minute, two. So we time them, and in the hospitals will have different durations. There's something we call even status epilepticus, where there is no intervening period of recovery. It just keeps waves and waves and waves of it keeps coming. You know, so the time period is very, very variable.
Okay, so I want to believe that this is different from, because I'm sure Maoli also perhaps has experienced what I was talking about. So I'm beginning to think there is a difference between when you go off, but you are aware.
You are aware of your environment.
You know,
That's
and
very,
so
very
maybe
different.
when someone flashes their arms, you go like, yeah, I know.
Yes.
It's just because you want to finish a certain chain of, thoughts that you are processing, right?
Exactly.
That's different from...
That's very, very different.
Okay.
You are very much aware. You just focus, almost like you are meditating.
Right,
you just want to focus on something. You're thinking certain things through, so you're not paying attention to everybody.
All right.
That's not what we're talking about. That's why I asked for that. Wave your hands in front of the person, trying to draw the person's attention. You'd realize that no, they're not with you.
Wow.
They're just staring into space. You know, and then you try and rouse them. So that hand waving motion goes across their face. Nothing. They're not even blinking. You know, would call that an absence seizure.
Okay.
You know, it's a bit tricky, you know, but if you have any suspicion, then you go and report to your doctor. The medically trained person would be able to assess. Most of the time, they will just ask you for an EEG. To be done at that point.
Okay, we have another question here. It says, hello, Kofi. My brother has suffered this a few times. He feels a sudden stomach ache and he feels like using the washroom for number 2. As soon as he sits, he loses consciousness. We are running a few tests, EEG and others. What could it be?
Yeah. You know, so I can't tell sitting here right now with this history what it is, but they're taking the right steps. They've been seen by a doctor. All the different investigations would be requested, so we know exactly what is happening. But could it be a seizure? Could it be? Absolutely, it could be a seizure. So it's good that they're doing the EEG.
Okay, Doc, I think you can go on with the presentation as we...
Right, so we're talking about the treatment, and Kofi, very important point. Up to 70% of people who are currently living with epilepsy could actually become seizure-free with the right treatment.
I want you to repeat that.
70%, up to 70% of people who are living with the condition and experiencing seizures could actually become seizure-free with treatment, with available treatment. 70%. So if you take 10 people who are right now experiencing this condition, they could become seizure-free. 7 could become seizure-free. 10. If you take 10 people, 7 could become seizure-free. It's just that, remember last week I mentioned that as many as, what's the number? 80% of all the people who have this condition, epilepsy, live in low income and middle income countries around the world. 80%. So Kofi, the issue too is money.
Looks like those in developed countries are able to manage it better.
Then they have, because they have
the money
access,
and the resources, right?
Exactly. They have access to the anti-seizure medications. Number 2, if you go around this country and you're looking for centers with this EEG equipment, go via your Land Cruiser. It's not a V8 cost price. But it's just not available in a lot of places. It's not available in a lot of facilities. So the money bit comes in, and then anti-seizure medications, the availability of anti-seizure medications in low-income countries is the stumbling block. But in our part of the world too, the other stumbling block I talked about is the spiritual connotations that we make, the spiritual associations that we make with this particular condition. Is why we don't seek medical care. Because I can tell you that there are some really good and not so expensive anti-seizure medicines in our part of the world as well. All right? But here the treatment gap really sometimes is because we believe it is spiritual. So we will seek spiritual measures to try and tackle it.
to tackle medical issues.
To tackle a very, very treatable
very
medical
opposite,
issue.
right.
And Kofi, I am happy to announce a young man who I first saw when he was, I think, in class 3 or so, and the parents were actually considering spiritual treatment.
Right.
And he was brought to me. Today, as we speak, he's reading pharmacy.
I would like to come back to that story, but let's go over the phone and
we've got somebody on the phone
we
line.
have
Yes.
someone on the phone. Hello.
Hello, good afternoon, doctor.
Good afternoon.
Hello, good
Yeah,
afternoon.
doctor is here. Yeah, right.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well, please. This information came from Volta region, Abo.
Right.
I happened to that day alight from a vehicle and saw this epileptic person prostrate on the ground on the right side.
Oh.
On the road side, yeah. Doing the same what as you were doing the explanation. So I thought to myself, so ask me again, can I do this? I have an experience which, when I implement it, it works instantly.
So I say that again.
Yes. Can I go ahead?
Yes, go ahead. No.
Oh,
No, sorry.
You learn from this thought. So I asked the people who knows this very person, and someone came out and said, "I'm his brother." So I told him he should go back to a building, behind a building, and then first he should go closer to the person.
Yeah.
Wipe the person's foot. The underfoot, that's the...
you try and put him in the recovery position.
I listen, please. Hello?
All right.
Can you please reposition yourself and give us a call? I think we're finding it really difficult to hear. I don't know if you got...
Right, so I think I got the gist. We're trying to find out what should happen because right at the trot station, we found somebody, experiencing a fit, a seizure.
Yeah.
So what can you do? Most of the time, remember we talked about the tongue. Most of the time, they would have clenched their teeth. Most of them would lose consciousness. Once they're having this generalized seizure, you have to make sure the person's in a very safe environment.
Okay.
So if you have to block off, it's in the middle of the road, you have to signal for vehicles to stop and all of that. Somebody has to be with this person. The seizures, the moment they stop, you'll have to put this person in what we call the recovery position.
Okay.
They'll have to be on their side, the left side. And if you go online right now, I think a lot of people will know how to put somebody in the recovery position so that their tongue doesn't actually fall back and block their airway.
Okay, is that also why? Because Benito was asking the same question, which I also wanted to ask, because I think last week I told you about a lady that I witnessed.
Exactly. So you have to hold them, put them in the recovery position. Okay,
so apart from the recovery position, why do people put like a spoon in between their teeth? Does it do anything?
Well, the dentist, you see, the whole thing is that you want to prevent them from biting their tongue.
Okay.
All right. So if they haven't clenched their teeth at the time, then it makes sense. Don't use a spoon. Don't use something so hard. Break their teeth. The force with which the contraction happens, the spasm happens. So don't use anything very hard. So just take a piece of wood or something, wraps a cloth around it. But most of the time, you wouldn't even get the opportunity. Once the seizure is happening, they've clenched their teeth already. So in between, once the seizure stops, maybe another one may come along. Another wave of seizure may come along. So just get a piece of wood or something. You can wrap a piece of cloth around it, and then you put it at the side, at the corner of their mouth, in between the teeth. You just don't want them to bite their tongue, because if they bite their tongue, they tend to bleed profusely because the tongue is a highly vascularized structure. So that's the whole idea. But putting them on their side in what we call the recovery position, so that their tongue doesn't fall back to obstruct their airway. They need to be able to breathe. It's very, very important. And you make sure that you secure the physical environment. Okay, Doc, we've run out of time. So soon. All right, so in rounding up, I would say that there are medications to treat seizures. The doctor will put you on a protocol. So if you have any concerns about seizures, take away point, it is not a spiritual disease. It is a medical condition that can be treated. Number 2, it is non-communicable. If you step in the urine, if you step in the fecal matter, you're not going to contract the disease. If you touch the person having the seizure, you're not going to contract the disease. Let us not hide, let us not stigmatize individuals with epilepsy. It is treatable. Kofi.
Right.
It is very treatable.
Thank you very much, Doc. Please put out your contacts. I'm very sure people would want to link up with you after the conversation.
Right.
So they can do so.
So for anyone who wants to reach out to us at Medicas Hospital, the number is 0501 477 340. Same WhatsApp number, 0501 477 340. Continue the conversation on our social media handles,
Right.
Facebook, X, and then Twitter at MedicasGH.
Doc, you day X. Don't get it worry. Well, thank you so much for coming. Enjoy the rest of your week, Doc.
It's been my pleasure, Kofi, being here.
Thank you. That was Dr. Yao Safo of Medicas Hospital. You can call him the Drive Doctor. I'm sure you've been informed. Let's go for the news and make sure you keep the conversation going on Twitter and all social media platforms using the hashtag Drive On.